Hello and welcome everyone to the fifth episode of A to Z Chess Opening Series. And in today's episode, we are going to learn about the alphabet E. From E, I am the most excited and happy to share with you all my favorite opening, the English opening. Now, the English opening starts with the C4, pawn to C4. Now, you might have a question that why are we not playing the central pawns? Why are we not playing the king's pawn or queen's pawn? Because as the fundamental suggests that we should control the center. To control the center, you should develop either of the pawn to E4 or the pawn to D4. But here we are playing the flank pawn, the bishop's pawn. We are playing it to the C4 square. What's the idea behind this? So generally, what I feel is if you play C4, you reduce the chances to your opponent so that he cannot play Sicilian against you and not the French, not the Caro-Kann. You don't have to prepare against too many lines there. So, and you get a very solid generalized position where you might get an attack as well if your opponent misplays it in the opening. So that's why C4. Now, after C4, your opponent is left with two main choices either to play with the pawn to C5 or the pawn to E5. If he goes pawn E5, then you are in the reverse Sicilian. If you play C5, then we are in the symmetrical variation. Here he can also play d5, but d5 is not that great idea because after the exchanges on the very second move, he got the queen out and that too attacked. We attack the queen will have to go back. Also notice that he has exchanged his central pawn with your flank pawn. So you already have an advantage there. That's why d5 is not something what your opponent would do. Let's say they play their pawn to e5. And then I'll quickly show you the general setup on how you should play. So you play a knight to c3, pawn goes to g6, knight f3 attacking the pawn, bishop g7 defended it. You play pawn g3 and he's playing his knight to e7. Normal development there. You play here and this after both the sides castling. Here white has two choices. Either white can go for d3 or can go with the aggressive variation d4. And here if the opponent exchange if pushes it up, then you can go with the knight to g5, and this is a general setup. But this is not something that I would recommend you. Better is you start not with knight to c3, but you start with your pawn to g3 line. Now, pawn g3 allows you for a quick development. And there's a small reason why you should not play the knight to c3. So, if you play knight to c3, then he has this option of playing the bishop to b4, which we don't want to give our opponent as of now. What we want to do there is make a little delay there. So after we play our pawn to g3, let's say he plays his knight to f6, we play bishop g2, he plays his knight to c6, and we go for knight c3 here. Now in this position, if your opponent plays bishop to b4, then he is completely losing this. Why is he losing this one? Because you go knight to d5, attacking the bishop, attacking the knight. If he captures your knight, then you are attacking this knight over here. In general, in chess, you say that you should go ahead, not only in chess, but in life. You should always try to go ahead. But here, if the knight is under attack and would come ahead on the d4 square, then he is losing the knight. How? You first give an attack to the knight, kick that knight off by playing your pawn to e3. Now here, the knight is left with only two choices. He can either go to b5 or he can go to f5. In both the variations, this is a twin variation where you are going to win a piece. Let's say if he goes to f5, then you have this fantastic queen g4, a double attack on the knight, queen, or a triple attack maybe on this piece as well. He cannot defend both of the pieces and you are going to win either one of them. Now let's quickly see what if he goes with his knight to b5. That leads to queen a4. Queen a4 is also giving a double attack and he's going to definitely lose one of his minor pieces. All right, let's see what if he's not going forward. Instead, he is going back and trying to give an attack to your knight, to your pawn. Here you go with the knight to f3. Now, knight f3 is a normal development as well as attacking his pawn to e5. If he defends it here naturally by playing his pawn to d6, then he is losing another piece because now queen a4 comes with a check and attack on the bishop. So, funnily enough, you are winning a piece in every single variation there. If not, then what can he do? He can push the pawn ahead, right? Or maybe he can just capture the pawn on d5 thinking that it's a free pawn. That is still not a free pawn because you can definitely capture on e5. But instead of doing that, try to win a piece. How can you win the piece? Play your queen to b3. You play your queen to b3, you're giving an attack to the bishop as well as to the knight. Now here he cannot move the knight, otherwise the bishop will be lost. So let's say he protects it. He protects the knight and then you try to kick that knight off by playing your pawn to e4. Now the knight will have to move and you are going to win the bishop. right? So every single variation after bishop b4, we have tricked our opponent. We are winning a piece definitely. Now let's say your opponent is lucky enough and he's not playing his bishop to b4. Instead, he's playing his bishop to c. If he plays his bishop to e5, then you play your knight to f3. You can also go with the line like e3 and get the knight to e2, but you can also go develop it by f3. Let's have a look at what if you go to e3. Pawn to e3, let's say he plays d6 and we develop our knight to e2. Now this is the structure that I like a lot. You are consolidated the center and also no attacks from his bishop coming to your pawn. After both the sides castle, here if your opponent makes a mistake by playing the bishop to e6 thinking that he is giving an attack to a pawn and he might try to win it, but that's a terrible blunder there, because you now play a pawn to d4, attack the bishop, he captures it, you capture back. Wherever the bishop goes to b6 or to b4, you are going to play a pawn to d5 and it's a 4. You're going to win the knight or the bishop there. Correct? So this is the setup that I personally like a lot. You can do this one in your games. Try playing these in your games. Now, quickly let's go back and see what if he's not doing the quick development like you are doing, right? Here instead he go aggressively by playing his pawn to d5. If he plays his pawn to d5, then we are happy to recapture it. He captures and then you play your knight to c3. Don't just give away your fianchetted bishop for this knight, but just play your knight to c3. Now, any beginner player would like to capture the knight on c3. A pro player would go back on b6 square. Here he captures, if he captures your knight on the c6 square, then you capture it back with the b pawn. Now you have promoted that flank pawn, the pawn on the b5 to c5, coming towards the center. Here, after the normal development, both the sides castle, he plays we can play a pawn to d4, giving an attack to the in the center. If he pushes this pawn forward, then you can just go with your knight to g5 and attack this pawn twice, with your bishop as well as with the knight. If he wants to protect that pawn, save that pawn at any cost, he will have to go with his pawn to f5. And at that time, you have this fantastic open file for your queen where the queen can go, give a check. The king goes to the side. You play your knight to f7, give a check, and he will have to give away the game there because now he is an exchange down. Correct? So these are some tricky lines there. And if he just exchanges instead, if he just exchanges, then you can just capture it and look at the pawn from b5. In just a short two moves, he got it to the d5. And this line is very good. Your pawn is doing a great job on d4. You can get the rook to b1 and the bishop along this diagonal, put some more pressure over that pawn, and you are definitely going to win the piece there. Correct? Alright, so this is all for the English opening. I hope you try this in your games and win a lot of games doing this. Um, Please let me know in the comment section, how are you liking this series? If you're liking the series, then do let me know for the next alphabets, that what can we discuss and what all we can learn. Till the time, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, share with your chess friends. I'll see you again in the next video. Till the time, thank you.